Welcome again, everyone, to Nubian Journeys. We are so happy that you could join us wherever you're at on this beautiful afternoon. I hope you are having a fun day with blue skies and the sun shining, and you're feeling great. I thank you if you've joined us for the first time. This is Nubian Journeys. We also want to say a big shout out to Lion Pride Music family for providing us with that intro music. Let's fly over to another Caribbean island. If you've not been here before, make sure you check out the other videos. Where shall we be today? We are flying down to the British Virgin Islands, which is a British overseas territory. Their motto is Vigilate, and I'm sure it is from a Spanish or Latin word, so someone will correct me. That's what it looks like to me. But if you're from the British Virgin Islands, please let me know if that's close to what it says. And this translates to be vigilant or be watchful. So, what does it mean that, this is a British overseas territory? We talked about this before in another video, but I'm not sure. So, if you haven't seen it, I'm going to try to explain that a little bit to you. This means that the British Virgin Islands recognizes Britain's monarch as their head of state, and they have not become independent from the United Kingdom. So while it is internally self-governing, Britain handles the country's foreign relations and defense. So government and status, British overseas territory, as we said, and it is a self-governing territory of the UK. So King Charles would be the head of state for the British Virgin Islands. This is what the islands look like. So if you're looking at your screen, you will recognize that there are quite a few islands there. So it is in the Caribbean Sea, the Eastern Caribbean Sea. It is part of an island chain. And does anyone know how many islands make up the British Virgin Islands? I'm going to give you 2 seconds. It is about 60 is what we've been finding. There are about 60 islands. Um, that make up the British Virgin Islands. So you have islets, you have keys, you have all these different areas. But the four main one, if you're looking on your screen, you will see they have a red dot on them. There's Tortola, Virgin Gorda, Anegada, and Just Van Dyke. So if you look on your screen, you'll see those are the bigger islands. So there are roughly between 15 to 16 of the islands where people do live. So that means there's quite a few of them where people do not live and they're quite small. So if you wanted to think about it, the whole region together is about 151 square kilometers, or if you deal in miles, then it is 58 square miles. So if you're looking at it, that's how big the islands together are. So, a little bit of history for you. There is some evidence of Amerindian presence in the islands, and so going as far back as about 1500 BC. And the first recorded settlement in the territory was by the Arawak Indians who came from South America in around 100 BC. So, if you want to, you can look that up. So we know, of course, that Amerindians were there and we know Arawaks were there. And what else do we know for history? The first European sighting of the Virgin Islands was by Christopher Columbus in 1493, and the Spanish claimed the islands by original discovery, but they never really settled there. So they never stayed, they never built, big buildings there. In 1508, Juan Ponce de Leon settled in Puerto Rico and reports in Spanish journals suggest that the settlement used the Virgin Islands for fishing, but not really for too much else. So there you go. That's the Spanish. So the Spanish had some um, pieces of the history. And then we move on now to 1615 when Dutch privateer Van Dyck created the first permanent settlement recorded. He traded with Spanish colonists in Puerto Rico and farmed cotton and tobacco. Then we move on to 1625 when the Spanish led an assault on the island of Tortola because uh, Joost van Dyck lent some non-military support to the Dutch. And so they came there and there was a battle. So Van Dyck escaped the island, which they would later call by his name, and sheltered in that island until the Spanish pretty much gave up and returned to Puerto Rico. So a little bit of fighting. So we see, some Dutch, we see some Spanish influences there. And now we will go on a little bit further. In 1640, the Spanish attacked Tortola again, and they did that again in 1646 and 1647. And then in 1650, Tortola was sold to Willem Handham. And then we see in 1665 that Dutch settlers on Tortola were attacked by the British privateer John Wentworth. He captured 67 slaves and took them to Bermuda. Now, this here is really interesting because this is the first record of slaves being held in the territory. So we're looking at 1665. And then we now see some British influence. And because I bet you were wondering, where does the British come from in British Virgin Islands? So in 1672, the United Kingdom or England took control of the British Virgin Islands at the outbreak of the Third Anglo-Dutch War. So since then, the British has maintained control over the British Virgin Islands. However, it was not until 1773, how long was that? Almost 100 years after the British took control of the islands, that they got their own legislature. So something else to note here, the British introduced sugarcane to the British Virgin Islands, and it became the main crop and source of foreign trade, and hence the introduction of slaves to the British Virgin Islands. So as I mentioned, slave labor grew exponentially during the 18th century. We see in 1717, there's a record of 547 Black people in the territory. And then by 1756, there was over 6,000 enslaved peoples in the British Virgin Islands. And of course, as mentioned before, it's because of they brought in sugarcane and cotton, and they wanted free labor to farm and look after those products. We see a lot of slave revolts also in the British Virgin Islands between 1790 and about 1830. There were many slave revolts there. And then emancipation or the abolition of slavery was on August 1st, 1834. So if you want to know some of the things that happened, right around slavery, right after slavery in the British Virgin Islands, I looked it up and apparently there were quite a few hurricanes that struck the British Virgin Islands. We had 1837, 1842, and 1852. Then we had some more in 1867 and 1871. So they suffered quite a few hurricanes, and so a lot of things were destroyed then. And they also had some drought between 1837 and 1847, which is around the time of that hurricane that was mentioned before. Then they had an outbreak of cholera, which killed about 15% of the population, and then an outbreak of smallpox in Tortola, which caused another 33 deaths. So you can see there are quite a few different disastrous events that have happened there many years ago. All right, and we're coming closer to our history, what we know of probably now. 1872, it became a part of the Leeward Islands. Then in 1956, the British Virgin Islands became a separately administered entity, and their flag that they currently have was adopted in 1960. They gained separate colony status in 1960 and became autonomous in 1967. And since the 1960s, they have diversified away from agriculture and they're more leaning towards tourism and financial services. And it is also becoming one of the wealthiest areas in the Caribbean. If you're wondering what the flag of the British Virgin Islands look like, this is it. I did not know this until I started digging in, so maybe you're like me and you're now noticing that that's what's there. Now, what does it mean? So, the British Overseas Territorial flag, consisting of a blue field, which is the background, with the Union Jack, which you can see in the upper left side, which looks like the British flag. Um, and then you have a badge bearing the British Virgin Islands coat of arms. The flag may be described as a different version of the British blue ensign. And the coat of arms, which you can see near the right side, is Saint Ursula and 12 golden oil lamps representing her 11,000 legendary virgin followers, which honors the name that was given to the island by Christopher Columbus. So in case you're thinking, oh, maybe I'd like to move down to the British Virgin Islands, because I certainly would like to visit. The population, as far as I could find, is about 39,000 or so. It doesn't have a very fast growing birth rate at the moment, and majority of the residents are of African descent. But you do have a lot of people who are born outside the territory, so their parents move away and they're born somewhere else and then they return. And you do have, so if you speak English, you'll have no problem there because the official language is English. And the capital is Road Town, which is located on Tortola. And in case you're wondering, if you move to Tortola, that's where most of the population is located. Their economy is based on the financial services, which is about 60%, and then you have tourism. And so if you're looking for offshore financial and tax neutral hub, this is where you would go. And you can see that, of course, tourism is there. You've got yacht charters and high-end visitors going there. And the currency there, so they use the US dollars. So if you're going, look for that. And my favorite part, usually when I go somewhere, I want to know what can I have to eat. So they have fish, and I think this is called fondue. I could be wrong. And you can see that at the top of your page right now, you see that on the screen you have like the fish is underneath, and you have boiled banana. I love me some boiled banana. And the fondue is the little round things you see in the top side of the plate, which is made, I think, with cornmeal, and I think I read something about okra being involved. So I'd try that. Then you also have Johnny cake, saltfish, and any other type of side. So, ground provisions, yam, potato, they like that kind of stuff. And then you have your other seafood. So it looks good to me. I'd try it. And if anybody goes and they try it, let me know. Then you want to know, what else can I do there? If you love the ocean, you'll find tons of things to do. My favorite, just sit under a tree at the beach, listen to the waves, read a good book, you know. I'm kind of like that. But if you're not the sit on the side of the beach person, you have the sailing you can do. They have some baths you can visit. You can hike in the national parks. They have a rum distillery you can visit. And then you have surfing and snorkeling and scuba diving. So whatever you want, you probably can find it there. And the one thing to remember is that, there is a hurricane season. So usually a hurricane season goes between about June to November. So you do want to take that into consideration when you're going down to visit most Caribbean islands. And now we've come to the end of what I wanted to say about the British Virgin Islands, except look at your screen. Can you see where the British Virgin Islands are located? They are located towards the right of your screen. So if you go left of Antigua and Barbuda and look a little bit more to the north, you will see that Puerto Rico is there. Then you have the Virgin Islands, UK, and then you have the Virgin Islands, US at the bottom of that. So I hope you now know where this is located. You've learned a little bit more, and now we can all go visiting the Virgin Islands. Once again, thank you for coming and listening to us today. We hope you learned something new and you can tell others about what you have learned. And if you like this channel, here's what we want you to do.
Please like and subscribe to Nubian Journeys. Thank you. Please like and subscribe to Nubian Journeys. Thank you.